In Paul's letter to the Hebrews, we read, "And you, Lord, laid the foundation of the earth in the beginning, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you remain. They will all wear out like a garment, like a robe, you will roll them up. Like a garment, they will be changed. But you are the same, and your years will have no end. And to which of the angels has he ever said, 'Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet'? Are they not all ministering spirits sent out to serve for the sake of those who are to inherit salvation? Therefore we must pay closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. For since the message declared by angels proved to be reliable, and every transgression or disobedience received a just retribution, how shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? It was declared at first by the Lord, and it was attested to us by those who heard." So Paul, speaking with Old Testament imagery, using metaphor to communicate who God is, what the relationship is to his people and to the physical universe. He discusses the idea of the earth being like a garment that is going to wear out, that will be rolled up and replaced. But because we're talking about Old Testament imagery and metaphor, we need to understand that this is not to be understood literally, just like one does not literally interpret the books of Daniel or the book of Revelation. So with this imagery that Paul is using, he is talking about the transition that's going to take place, or that did take place when he wrote this, of the transition out of the old covenant, where sin and death were in control, when they had man bound, where the grave was holding man, keeping him apart from his relationship with God, into the new covenant, where Christ has come to us in the incarnation, where he performed his ministry, where he was resurrected, where he rose from the dead, and where he ascended to the Father's right hand. So radical change between these two realities. Death no longer has dominion over man. Jesus' work restored the relationship between God and his people. So that's what Paul is getting at by talking about this change in creation that he's describing. And he goes on to say, "And to which of the angels has he ever said, 'Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet'?" So he's addressing a specific teaching that was going around, that Jesus was not God, that Jesus was just either a man or an angel that did a work for God. And it's understandable that this would be a popular view, considering how angels were the predominant way of God acting and guiding and communicating to his people throughout much of the Old Testament. But Paul clearly says that this is not the case. Jesus is not just an angel, because God raised him up and set him at his right hand, pointing to the idea of the Trinity. And then he goes on to say that are not all these spirits ministering spirits to serve those for whom life has been given to inherit salvation. So the angels are messengers, are helpers for mankind to lead them towards the path of holiness. And then Paul goes on to warn that we dare not ignore or neglect such a great salvation that Christ has provided for us. It's the things we've heard from others in the past, specifically Old Testament prophets, and then the other apostles, communicating their firsthand experience with what God had said and done prior to the incarnation, and then the things that Jesus accomplished while he was in his ministry and with his resurrection. So to neglect such a great thing is an abomination, is an insult, is an affront to what God has done in order to restore mankind. Because that's really what all of this is about, is mankind was enslaved to sin and death. God took on human flesh. God came, taught, led, raised up disciples to become apostles, to take this message of what Jesus had accomplished to the immediate surroundings, to all around the Mediterranean, and then eventually to all the known world. So everything that God has done leading up to the incarnation and then in the incarnation is for the restoration of his relationship with his people.